Thank you so much. Merci bien, cher Marc, for the kind invitation. And I'm very glad to be with you today. Also seeing, dear colleagues from METO. And so what I'm going to do in the next few minutes, I'm going to just share some ideas along the questions that you've posed. And I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to touch upon all relevant dimensions, but I'm going to try to do so briefly. I think, first of all, we have to acknowledge that when it comes to Iran and Iranian perceptions of Russia's war on Ukraine, there is a huge gap between regime and society relations. At the societal level, there is immense skepticism about the role of Russia that is nurtured historically, as Russia has played an important role also in the modern history of Iran, and Iran has lost significant territory, mostly in the Caucasus, to Russia at the time when Iran was quite weak. So all this memory is still very much there, and it was somehow revitalized over the question of Russia's role in the Iran nuclear negotiations in the last 1 or 2 decades. This skepticism that is also shared by some of the policy circles in Iran is based upon basically Russian opportunism and Russian interest to keep the flame of the conflict between Iran and the West alive, because it would be hugely counterproductive for Russian interests if we saw a normalization of relations between Iran and the West. And one major threat from a Russian perspective was always the threat of Iran energy sanctions removed, so that potentially Russia's energy monopoly over Europe would witness a competitor. Yet, despite beyond the oil issue, I think there are also political issues here that drive Russia's interest not to be interested in a kind of normalization of relations between Iran and the West. And as I've put it in a recent article, this may be the normalization of relations between Iran and the West would be a much higher risk for Russia than a nuclear Iran, because Russia as well as China have been able to benefit politically but also geoeconomically from this Iran-Western conflict. Of course, sticking to state society views on Iran, what we've seen is that the bulk of the Iranian media taking over the Kremlin's propaganda narrative about its war on Ukraine, and with the Russian ambassador giving a press conference in Tehran urging the Iranian media to engage in some kind of Gleichschaltung, one could say, in terms of using the word military, special military operation instead of invasion and war. But this press conference, which, by the way, the Chinese ambassador did in a similar fashion a year or so ago, created also some backlash within the policy circles. And also specifically, Russia's attempt to hijack the talks at the very end, of the JCPOA process, which was believed to be the very end of the JCPOA process, by connecting the sanctions that were imposed upon it by the West with Iranian-Russian cooperation in the wake of a restored JCPOA. But somehow the Russians have backpedaled from this strange demand. They've been asking for a written guarantee from the United States, which they later on alleged such a thing was obtained by them. So they somehow backpedaled, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure about all the reasons here. But I think part of the reasons may be this kind of backlash that also existed within Iranian policy circles, that feared that Russia could again, play a role that is more attuned with its, or that is really, ignoring Iranian interests. And then there was also, some kind of, because this goes back also to some Iranian concerns over Russian behavior during the JCPOA process also a decade ago, that was verbalized by former Foreign Minister Zarif in a leaked audio file, last year, where he also raised concerns about the role of Russia at the very end of the last negotiation round that led to the 2015 JCPOA. So this also revitalized those concerns about Russia's, in particular, Russia's, behavior in the JCPOA process. But after all, the Russians backpedaled from this demand, as I said, and perhaps because of the backlash that they saw even with pro-Russian elements within the Iranian establishment, and potentially fearing a reduction of its political capital there. And secondly, perhaps contemplating about the possibility of using an Iran free of sanctions to circumvent their own crippling sanctions regime. So this may be, two of the points that have, that have, driven Russia's backpedaling on this kind of hijacking attempt. As a last comment, I'm going to just mention something that goes beyond, Iran-Russia dimensions, which is, I think, will have, an impact on the behavior of authoritarian states, non-Western authoritarian states worldwide. And this, I would fear, would materialize in a, in the event of a Russian victory over Ukraine. And I think that a Russian victory over Ukraine would embolden, such non-Western authoritarian powers who, share the idea, as Tehran and Moscow do, about Western weakness. And this is a very important calculation from Iranian and Russian decision makers, as far as I can tell, when driving their own strategies, when driving their own foreign policies. They would not expect a robust answer from the West. And this, I think, can be witnessed, on various, on multiple levels of operation. And I think that if we're going to end up with a Russian victory, this might not be a good signal for the future. So I'm going to stop it here. Thank you.